let's begin. We're at 2 o'clock. Welcome back, everyone. Thank you for staying with us. Just a few things before we get started with the next part of our special event. So first of all, just like to thank you again for bearing with us at the beginning of the program. We ran into some unexpected technical difficulties, always unexpected, and I really appreciate your patience. Unfortunately, we were not able to share a recording of the film, but if you are in the US or Canada, you can stream it on Amazon and other services. This session, however, with Randy, this discussion will be recorded and made available online on our YouTube channel. We will be sharing with you as registrants, you will get an advanced link before it's made public on the YouTube channel. And finally, I just want to mention that we have people with us from throughout the world in many different places. I just do want to specifically mention everybody from Israel who's joining us. Today is Yom Yerushalayim, and it is there have been difficult situations up north happening right now, and our thoughts and prayers are with all of our collective family in Israel. The film we just saw was deeply moving. It was engaging from the very beginning. And now Randy is going to discuss for a few minutes the film and his involvements and how it happened, it developed, and then we'll take some questions. In order to ask questions, please post them in the Q&A. You can find that on the bottom of your screen. If you post it in the chat, it's going to be more difficult for us to go through it. And Randy will try to take as many questions as possible. So thank you all again for being with us. And Randy, I pass it over to you.
Hi, everyone. First of all, apologizing for my looks. I don't have a makeup person like they had in the film. And I'm undergoing a skin cancer treatment to supposedly prevent skin cancer by killing off all the pre-cancer cells, and apparently my whole face is pre-cancer. So that's the first apology for having to look at me. But I'm very happy that so many people logged in and were able to see the film. Again, apologies for whatever technical difficulties JewishGen might have been having in delivering it over Zoom. I hope that if people want to watch it again in the US and Canada, it's now streaming on all various platforms and cable channels, not on the subscription things like Netflix, but on everything else, Amazon and Apple and all those type of things, YouTube. So you can find it there. And we have a distributor who just went to the Cannes Film Festival to talk to foreign distributors. And so I'm hoping that that happens soon for the rest of the world. I'll be traveling actually in a week or so to Prague for the premiere in Prague, which is coming up on June 19th. So I'm very excited about that. I'll start off by giving a little bit of a background on how we put the film together. And while I'm doing that, please post questions in the Q&A. For whatever reasons, I logged out of the previous Zoom and then logged back in, and now I don't see any of the old Q&A questions, so you might have to repost those for me to see them. But anyway, I'm happy to answer everybody's questions, and I know this is a genealogy group. These are my people watching, so I'm happy to answer all the tough questions that you might have for me. So what happened was, in 2021, sort of that second summer of the pandemic, we were able to travel again. And we went to Italy to visit my aunt and my cousins. And I was telling my cousin Serena, who you saw in the film, that I thought I could trace her mom's family back to Venice. Her father is from, as an old Venetian family. So that wasn't a surprise that she's Venetian on her father's side, but to think that her mother's family on the Schoenberg side was also from Venice, that was, I thought, sort of exciting, possibly for her. Although I've talked with Serena over the decades about genealogy, she never was that interested. So I didn't expect her to be too interested. But her immediate response was, "Oh, that's so interesting. You should make a film about it." And I sort of laughed because I thought, okay, who would want to watch a film about my genealogy after doing this for almost 50 years? Most people, their eyes glaze over. But she said no, she thought it could be made into a film. And she's, besides being a painter, also has made now in the last 10 years or so some films, some art films in Venice. And so So, I thought, okay, that's an interesting idea, but how is that ever going to happen? And then on my way back home from Italy with my family, we stopped in Cincinnati to visit my in-laws, and I got just 2 days before returning home, I got a text message from an old high school friend of mine, Brad Schley, who is a film producer. And he said, are you busy on Monday? And I said, well, we come home Sunday. Why? What's going on? He says, well, I need you for a film I'm making. Can you come to my house on Monday? So I thought about it, and I said, okay, I'm arriving Sunday after this long trip. I don't have anything else planned. I'll go to Brad's house and see what's going on. So I went, and he said he was working on this film, not Fioretta, obviously, but a different film with this director, Matthew Mashori, and they had just gotten to the last day of filming, and the expert that they had arranged to film on the last day had canceled in the last minute, and he was supposed to speak to them about sort of how German Jews in California were and operated, because the film they were doing, which ended up being called Who Are the Marcuses, I think it's not quite out yet on streaming, but it's been shown quite a lot, was a film commissioned by Ben Gurion University in the Negev in Israel, because what happened was this couple, the Marcuses, they came from Germany, escaped the Nazis, they married in New York, and they lived there for a little bit. And the husband was a doctor, and the wife worked on as a secretary on Wall Street. And in the 50s, they had earned a little money and set it aside, and then they went and retired out to San Diego. And when they were almost 90 years old, they were visited by a fundraiser from Ben Gurion University, who was visiting with their neighbor, and said, oh, you might want to talk to the couple in the condo next door to me in San Diego. And so he went next door, and he dropped some brochures, and they lived about 15 years more. I think the wife lived to be 104. And when they died, Ben Gurion University received almost $500 million. So it was the largest charitable gift ever. And this very modest living family couple in San Diego, originally from Germany, had donated $500 million. So how did that happen? Well, the wife, when her husband had wanted to invest some money, had asked her boss how to invest it, and he said, oh, well, I can't do it because I'm retiring, but I just met this young guy from Omaha, Nebraska, who I think is really going places. You might want to invest some money with him. And that young guy turned out to be Warren Buffett. And of course, like typical German Jews, they invested whatever, $10,000 in the 1950s and then never touched it. So they didn't look at it or spend any of it, and just let it run. And of course, by the time they died, Warren Buffett had become fabulously successful, and it had grown and grown and grown to $500 million, which they then donated to Ben Gurion, because of course they were very big supporters of Israel and very charitable. And so my friend Brad and the filmmaker Matthew Mashori were doing this film, and they told me the story. And I said, well, what can I say about them? I didn't know them. And they said, it's fine, just say what you know about German Jews. So I said, well, in general, German Jews are interested in education, and they're very charitable, but they're also very frugal and don't spend a lot of money, and those type of generalities. And they said, that's great. Why don't you just say that on camera? So they set it up, and right as they set up the shot, the power went out, and it took them about 45 minutes to fix it. And during that time, I was just sitting in front of the camera, and the director was there. And I said, I just got back from this trip, and my cousin Serena had this idea to make a documentary on family history. Ha ha ha. And anyway, both Matthew Mashori, the director, and the producer were, I guess, looking for their next project and thought it was a really good idea. So we met then after they finished filming that film. We met several times, and they talked me through how this could become a film, which I was still a little skeptical, even though I'm in love, of course, with the genealogy, but the idea of making a film out of it seemed a little bit crazy. But ultimately then in January of 2022, I took a scouting trip with Matthew, the director, and I took him around and introduced him to all the people you just met in the film, all that cast of characters. And he says, and I think he's right, that's sort of when it crystallized into a film, because he realized it wasn't just going to be this sort of genealogical discovery, but also he could introduce all of these amazing people who live in Europe and are preserving our heritage in Europe and making it accessible to those of us who live no longer there anymore and need help tracking things down. So that was the plan. And originally it was going to be a sort of Three Musketeers story with me and Serena and my cousin Arnie. And in the very last minute, Joey ended up coming along, and the filmmakers looked at Joey and said, aha, this is going to be a different film. And all of a sudden he became the focus of the film, and it became this father-son journey, which I think ended up being terrific. I have to say, I imagined the film much different, right? All of us have watched Finding Your Roots and Who Do You Think You Are, those type of genealogy programs. And it's usually a person sitting at a table, flipping through documents, and then they cut away to sort of a Ken Burnsy zoom in, zoom out on old black and white photos. And that's why I was a little skeptical and thought, okay, how are you going to make this into a full film? But Matthew Mashori had a completely different conception of it to make it into what really is a feature film, just like an action movie where there is actually very little of that zoom in, zoom out, almost nothing. There's no breakaway to old photos. He does do that recreation of me as a young boy or me as a young man going to Prague. But really it's all done like it's a regular feature film. And I think that's why it's been so successful and worked so well. We premiered the film last October, officially at the Woodstock Film Festival in New York at the end of September. And then we went to Zurich, Switzerland for the European premiere at the Zurich Film Festival. And then Matthew and I flew to Tel Aviv on October 6th in the afternoon. I went down south near Sderot to my wife's cousin, the Weisbergers, who live down there, and had a beautiful Shabbat dinner, and returned back to Tel Aviv on the evening of the 6th or early morning of the 7th, and slept for a few hours. And then the war started. We were supposed to screen the film at the Anu Museum, formerly Beit Hatfutzot, on the campus of Tel Aviv University on October 8th. And of course that was canceled. And we ended up doing, anyway, a Zoom program for about 100 people that Sunday for those of us who were there and wanted to maybe stop watching the endless reel of horrors on CNN. And that went very well. Matthew and I did return to Israel at the end of March and showed it very successfully to a big crowd at the Anu Museum. So we did get to go there and see it. But it's been quite a journey making the film, and now going around the country and the world showing it. It's been shown in Vienna for a week, and as I mentioned, it'll be in Prague and hopefully get further European distribution soon. So, okay, so that's, I think, enough of an introduction. I see a bunch of questions in the Q&A, so I think I'm going to go through those first, and then we can go through the chat, if that's okay. So Anna Mahler says, somehow you're lucky because they were rich and had a lot of documentation. What about poor families? What's your advice? They weren't all wealthy, but I think I am extremely lucky to have families in places where there are records. Generally, the records are better in larger towns than in smaller towns. So that's why we were in Vienna and Prague and Venice, principally in this film. But you did see we found, a grave from the 1600s in a little town outside of Theresienstadt in Uschtek. So sometimes you can get lucky in the smaller villages and towns, but of course it is a lot of luck having family in the right place. I always thought of maybe at one of the genealogy conferences doing a lecture on where if you got to choose, where would you want your family to be from so you could find their genealogy. And certainly there's some very good places, Amsterdam and Frankfurt and Vienna in the large cities, but be curious to find out what's the best small town to be from in terms of records. But the advice I have is really to just keep at it. I started truthfully as a very young kid that tree that the young Randy is playing with on the ground. I did that when I was 11 years old, and had 300 names on it, and I've just been plugging away, and often you hit that sort of brick wall, that dead end. My advice always is to go sideways. There was a wonderful genealogist named Celia Mail who taught me that uh, that that sometimes you can learn a lot also about your family by looking at other families in the same town, or looking, just sort of following the tree where it goes through the in-laws to the next, because it goes sort of sometimes in a big circle. When you get in those towns, everybody's related, everybody is connected to everybody else. And so if you're stuck on your family in a particular place, try to work on other families in that same place, and you might learn something that will help you on your personal journey. So that's first answer. Have I been able to dig further into my family? Yes, my mom always complains that the film is about my dad's side, and what about her side? And just a week or so ago, I found a record in a small town in Moravia that pointed to ancestors in Hamburg. This is in like 1750 time frame. And so I just added on two new ancestors, because it had the parents of this guy who moved from Hamburg down into Moravia to go to a yeshiva down there. So yeah, I've been able to dig further. I also heard from Fabrizio Lely, the tall guy in Florence, and he is still working on those families, on Halfon and Kalonymus, and he says he thinks he found maybe another Kalonymus somewhere that might be related. So anyway, I'm gonna have to dig further in Italy also, but it is endless for those of us who are doing it. If you never stop, it never ends. How long did we spend in this road trip? I think it was about 6 weeks almost, because I got COVID right in the beginning. That's not in the film, but they had filmed all those recreations first, and then I arrived, and while they were filming, I sort of had dinner with the filmmakers in the evening, and they sort of dropped one after another like flies. And I didn't realize they were contagious while I was meeting with them, because they all said they tested negative, and then soon enough I was positive. And so we had to delay it for about a week. So it took about 6 weeks or so, and there was of course filming in Los Angeles also. Why were leaves placed between the stones and the gravestone? That was something Ahab Heidler taught us, and he, as he says, it's a little hard to understand him. And I understand there may have been a problem with the subtitles in the film. I'm not sure why that was, but we'll investigate that. I apologize for that. But he says, the tradition is sort of, humans are like the grass. We go and we blow away, and so you put something between the stones. I hadn't heard of that before, but he's usually right. So I think if you look it up, you'll probably find out that is a tradition where possible. Let's see. Question as to the Hungarian association of my extended family from Steve Goldberger. The Schoenbergs are from Hungary, so I do have some Hungarian. Also on my mom's side, there's a Slovakian Schwartz family that was all Hungary before, so I have that. But we didn't dig so deeply into the Schoenbergs are a little bit of a dead end in 1800. Jonathan Cooner, whose father was friends with my mother's father and my father's father at the same time. It's the gentleman in Vienna who had old textiles and pertinent business records. Might he have records dealing with other Viennese Jews and textiles during the late 19th century? Jonathan's asking because his great-grandfather and grandfather had business like that. He has underneath his store in the basement all these old record books, mostly of customers, I think, but he might have also supplier information, and it might be worth contacting him. His shop is just behind the State Opera in Vienna, around the corner from the Sacher Hotel, if you know where that is. So it's hard to miss if you go to Jungmann und Neffe. It was originally a Jewish firm, and his family got it after the war, and that's where he works. So yeah, I can put you in touch, anybody in touch with Georg Galgush. He is actually coming to Philadelphia to the IAJGS conference, and will be the guest speaker at the luncheon, which is a combined Hungarian and Austria-Czech luncheon this year. So if you haven't signed up for that luncheon, please do, because Georg is amazing. Okay, Allison asks, Arts Council Project Northern Ireland. To screen it in Ireland, yeah, please get in touch with me, and I'll put you in touch with the various distributors. There's one distributor who's working with sort of one-off festivals and things like that, and then another distributor who's trying to get it shown in theaters and online in Europe. So please contact me if you can. Maybe Abrami can put my email in the chat or something, or type an answer to that. How is Joey doing now? I've been texting with him today. He's actually in Vienna, and he's in cooking school and culinary school at the CIA, the Culinary Institute of America, CIA, in Hyde Park in New York in the Hudson River Valley. But he's doing an externship in Vienna, working at I think he says it's the 18th best restaurant in the world, whatever that means, a restaurant called Steirer Eck. And it's a very, very fancy restaurant. And that's what he wants to do with his life. I think it's completely nuts, but of course he thinks genealogy is nuts. And so we can have different opinions about that. But anyway, he's peeling potatoes and slicing onions and things like that for this amazing restaurant in Vienna, in the Stadtpark in Vienna. Anonymous person asked if I looked at DNA. I have, of course, done all the DNA tests. I'm on all the various platforms. It was not necessary to use DNA in this particular story for this line because it's based on the records. But if you know, you can find me there if you want to see if you match me or any members of my family. I have some interesting things on my Y DNA. The Schoenberg line doesn't match anybody, basically, which is unusual. And Adam Brown, who is running the Y DNA study in Israel, where they're studying Jewish male Y DNA, he says that my Y DNA, which ended up in Hungary, is non-Ashkenazi in origin, meaning it's likely a Jew from the Ottoman Empire came up when the Ottoman Turks were all the way to Vienna in the 1600s or earlier, and crossed over or left a DNA deposit somehow, and so my family ended up in Hungary. But anyway, that's that's what I learned through DNA. Mentioned the Halfon family from Italy to France. I have not researched yet in France. The Halfons, there is a grave or was a grave in Vienna, like that old one we found at the other cemetery. His son has a grave that has 4 generations on it, and says the family is from France, Sarfati. But that grave has disappeared since World War II. Fortunately, we have the transcription of it. But I haven't gone back to France. The Eliyahu Menachem Halfon is supposedly the grandson of Maharik, which is a famous rabbi, Joseph Colon, and his family was in Piedmont, and before that in Savoy and Chambéry area. And I went skiing near there, so I drove through the place, but I haven't done any research to know whether they have any records from the 1400s of Jews in France. But yeah, that would be fun if it exists. So there are questions. Unfortunately, there weren't subtitles, I guess, for everybody or for some people. The older woman who spoke at that little luncheon family reunion that we had, her name, I think, yes, was Renata Pavlikova, but that I think is her married name, if I recall. She's from the Ebel family. I'd have to look up what her genealogy is, but it could be a relation for you. And then just before you were at Sir Wittengasse, there was a monument with inscribed names. So that in Vienna, that's a new Holocaust monument near the National Bank that has all of the names of the Austrian victims, and we visited that. In Prague, there was that synagogue, the Pinkas Synagogue, it's called. Someone had a question about that. And that synagogue has all the names of the Czech victims of the Holocaust on it. But the one we saw in Vienna was a new monument that just opened, I think 2 years ago, right before the end of 2021, I think is when it opened. Let's see. So Ellie Bolograph is asking for the Biederman family. And yes, that's a big family that I'm related to through my grandmother, my father's mother's side. And there's a lot of information on the Biederman because they were super important and basically helped refound the Jewish community in Vienna in the early 1800s. And they go back into the Pressburg, Bratislava area to the family of the Michael Simon family. He was the chief rabbi of all of Hungary. But anyway, that's a good family to be connected to. And Ellie, if you write to me, I can give you more information. Pinkas Synagogue, yes, is one of the, they say Pinkas, Pinkas. They're not quite sure why it's called that, I think. There's a book I have on the synagogue, and it's a very, very old synagogue in Prague, a very nice one also. It was the synagogue for the Horowitz family, I think, in Prague, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, so where Stephanie Kruskol asks, were the locations that were more difficult than others to find information on? And her family's ended up under communist rule. She's impressed with Prague. Difference in locations based on which side of the Iron Curtain they were on. So yes, I mean, in the communist areas, there was unfortunately a lot of destruction. Even late, we saw when we went with Julius Miller to where that radio tower is, that was built in the late 1980s, just before everything changed. Very sad, and they tore out all the stones. So there's a lot of destruction in all of those places, and some places you're lucky and you still have these old cemeteries, and others they've been mowed over and turned into parks or built on top of. So it's just very, very difficult to know. You really need local help, people like Julius Miller who go into the local archives to see if there's any land records or other type of records you can get in the communist era areas, but sometimes you get lucky like that. Thomas Fioretta is my friend is asking about Sweden. And again, please just get in touch with me and I can connect you to the various distributors. Would love to show it in Sweden. I have some cousins up there also. Alice Solovey, were the Marcuses descendants of the Ephraim family? I have no idea. You're talking about the movie about the German couple, who are the Marcuses. Those are, they're from, I can't remember, in the middle of Germany, somewhere, small town Germany. So I don't know if they're descendant or not. Someone from Massachusetts Climate. So here's a question regarding all the awesome archival records and gravestones. How much time would you estimate it represented? In other words, how long did it take you the first time to discover them? Fred Davis. Oh, that's from Fred Davis. Okay. So how long? When you discover something, it's immediate. You're right there. And so I don't remember for each element how long it took me to find them. I mean, I'll give you an example. That giant book that we see where there's that ancestor Frumatel, who's his Matthew Mashori's favorite person in the film, because he says, how could someone like Frumatel living in 1700 have expected that in 2024 we'd be talking about her on Zoom like this? Just sort of, she's just an ordinary person living at that time. But there are these books, right? So that archive has scanned most of their books and didn't scan that giant book. So I had to go there and look through it, because someone who isn't in the film, Alexander Putik, said that he thought there was a record in there. So I went and found that. And it obviously takes a lot of time if you have to go into the archives and request the book. The first time I went to Prague and went into the archives, it was right after everything had been communist. Everything sort of changed right around when I met Michaela that first time. She took me into the archives, and no one spoke any language other than Czech. The indexes were all in Czech. The places I was looking for had German place names in the records that I had, in the 19th century. And I didn't know the Czech town names because sometimes they're completely different. Like a town called Marisch Neustadt, where my great grandfather was born, is now Unikov or Unisov, something like that. So there was no Wikipedia or online way to find even what town we're looking for. So it was very difficult at first in the archives. Things are much, much easier now. Let me keep going. Christine Lodvinsky says she's inspired and she wants to go to Poland. Any advice on how to structure a trip? I do advise seeking local help if you're going to do a sort of a deep dive like this. It's just invaluable because just wandering yourself into an archive can be fun and exciting and fruitful, but you're more likely to get somewhere if you know someone who knows how to talk to the people behind the desk. I had the experience more recently in Bratislava, where I went with someone who was local and could speak the language, and at first they say, no, you can't see the book and you can't copy it, and then by the end of the stay they're letting you take pictures of everything, and because the person you're with is schmoozing them, and it's much better with a guide. So look for someone local would be my advice. Did I ever get into that cemetery where we weren't allowed in the film? I have been there, and I have been there since. I've been there previously also. It's a very nice place that they're cleaning up. It was a jungle. Matter of fact, I put on YouTube a video I think I took in 2014 when they were filming Woman in Gold, and I was in Vienna, and I went there, and the plants were as high as my head. You had to sort of wade through just to see things. And now they have a volunteer project that's cleaned it up, and it's looking very nice in there, which you could see from the aerial shot that they took. But so yes, I've been there, and I have lots of ancestors there. Can I explain what I'm doing with Genie.com? And so Genie is just a platform to work on your family tree, and the benefit of Genie is it's collaborative, and I could talk for hours about it, but it allows you to work on your family tree like it's a giant jigsaw puzzle. So you can work with other people, and they can add things, you can add things to theirs. And it's and I'm a volunteer curator there, so I have access. You said I asked for access to the family. I do that just to be nice, because I actually already have access to everybody's tree on Genie because I'm a volunteer curator. But I figure if I'm looking at your tree, you might want to be able to have access to the things that I'm doing. So I always send people collaboration requests. So that's what that was. Renee Garbus asks, what are the best tools to use as a beginner to start documenting? Great question. I always say just start, and don't be afraid of making mistakes or doing the wrong thing. I like and recommend the platform Genie.com for building your tree because it's very easy to fix mistakes. You can get help from other people there, but you can use all sorts of different computer programs. I like also having something that's public that can benefit other people. So all the research I do is available to others, rather than just keeping it private for me on my hard drive. It also allows other people to find mistakes that I make, because invariably we make mistakes, and it's nice to have a whole bunch of eyes looking at it. So I recommend just starting your tree. For research, you're better off maybe at Ancestry or MyHeritage or Family Search. Those three are sort of the big data aggregators that have lots and lots of records. And so I use all of those constantly, but end up building on Genie. If you're on Genie, it's part of the MyHeritage family. They also have the Family Search tree. And so if you pay for a MyHeritage subscription while you're using Genie, which you can use for free, by the way, you can get matches and access Family Search and MyHeritage trees through Genie. So I like Genie. But anyway, that's my suggestion. In terms of working, you need to talk to everybody in your family and get as much information as you can, as soon as you can. Don't wait too long. And you never know where you're going to find information. So as I said earlier, I always recommend going sideways, filling out the tree, having all the brothers and sisters and their spouses, and fill out the cousins, because sometimes you won't find a record for your ancestor, but they'll have a sibling that has a better record that can take you back one generation, that type of thing. So is Joey, Rachel Yodelman asked if is Joey bitten by the genealogy bug. I think he loved being in the film. He loved being at the Zurich premiere, and he got to wear the suit that we got him at Georg's. So he likes the sort of fashion side of it. Whether he's into genealogy or not, I'm not so sure. It's a little difficult, I think, for the people in my family to be, to make a lot of progress in genealogy, since I'm working on it 100% of the time and have sort of occupied the field. But I think he has an appreciation for history, and now he's living in Vienna for a few months and learning a little bit more about that, and learning more about especially my grandfather Arnold Schoenberg, who has his 150th birthday this year. So there are a lot of concerts and events. Anonymous asks about Kalonymus. It's a good rhyme, from the rabbinic family. So Kalonymus is like the Jewish family, the family, Rashi's in-laws are Kalonymus. It's a big old family. How they're all connected to each other is anybody's guess. So we have not been able to connect back too much further from the family that was in Naples. Fioretta's father was sort of the chief astronomer for the King of Naples and things like that. That's why he had all these books on astronomy and philosophy. So he obviously came from an important family. We know a couple generations around him, but not further back, unfortunately. But that would be nice, right? Because Rashi is, 1100s. Did I ever discover why they wouldn't let me in the cemetery? Also a very good question. Not really. I talked to my friend who's sort of in charge of the Jewish community there, and she acted as if nothing happened. I think my best explanation is that during COVID, some people went just a little bit nuts being locked up. And I think that's what happened there. And they were just overwhelmed with the Ukrainian refugees that were coming in at that time, and just decided they didn't want to deal with it. I'm still a little bit hurt by that, but it did make for a good scene in the film. So, that's that at least it had some benefit. Why are some gravestones pointed at the top? What does the shape signify? That I do not know the answer to. Someone like Johannes Rice might know, but I don't know. I think the gravestones have different styles, maybe because the stone cutters had those different styles. So imagine when people in those days, and even today, when you're making a gravestone, you're a little bit at the mercy of the stone cutter. So if the stone cutter has a style that they like, that's probably the stone that you get, is my guess. Especially in those older ones. In Vienna, in that cemetery, there's a lot of individuality, and they had special architects design big tombs and crypts and things like that. Have I run into problems with someone objecting to family history? Yes, they're people, we're Jews, they're people who have all different opinions, and some people don't like it and some people do. And my point of view, which some people don't like, is I don't tell you what to do, and so you can't tell me what to do. And so if I want to investigate you, my cousin, that's my thing and not yours. And you should, if you don't like it, don't look on the internet and Google yourself all the time, which is usually what most of those people do when they're who like objecting to what other people do. So that's my take. Moving right along. How are we doing time wise? Okay, I guess Ruth Ellen Mulberg, she asked about DNA. I talked about that already a little bit. And did I have any issues with name changes and transliterations? So name changes, you have to get used to all the names being spelled differently every time you run across them. So in the area, let's say in the 19th century in Prague, there'll be a different spelling of the first name when the person's born, another spelling at the marriage, and yet another spelling or variant of the name when they die. So, and each kid sometimes it'll have a different name. And especially for women and first names for women, it's very fluid. I think sometimes the rabbis or whoever's writing the book sort of made up the names. And so you have to be not tied to spellings and understand that certain names are related to each other. Every Esther becomes a Teresa at a certain point in the 19th century and things like that. So you have to know what names are working together. And there's that concept of a kinui. So you have the dove and bear and things like that, or wolf with Farkas and things like that in Hungary. So you have all these different name variations that can happen. Just don't get too upset about it. Speaking of Farkas, Heidi Farkas asks, what was my family doing in Prague that allowed them to relocate to Vienna? So after 1848, there was sort of a clampdown. That period in Europe, there was an attempted revolution, and then there were a lot of difficulties. That Prague family, the Nachhuds, came because I think a son-in-law moved to Vienna for whatever reason, and then brought the rest of the family into Vienna. They could start moving around after 1848 and 1867, especially. Jews had full civil rights then in Austria-Hungary and could move around, and that's when that particular family came down to Vienna. Have I found other musicians in the Nachhut family? There were some. There's a name you heard briefly, Yontov or Yontov Butter. I found there was a note that my grandfather's sister had left behind, saying that there was a famous cantor in the family named Srul or Srile or something like that, which I didn't understand at the time was the same name as Israel. But then I found a cantor named Israel Yontov, who's an uncle, and that clearly is the person she was referring to. He was a big-time cantor. Also, his son was a cantor. So there were cantors in the family on the Schoenberg side there. How did you find Serena? Serena's my father's sister's daughter. She's 2 years older than I am. So she's known me since I was born. So I didn't have to find her. And what is her relation to Fioretta? Well, so Fioretta goes through my father's father, and it's through her mother's father, Arnold Schoenberg. So that's easy. Did I get access to the cemetery? Yes. Did I locate any relatives who disappointed me? Barbara Kahn asks, I have, you don't talk about them so much, but I have some that are a little embarrassing or very embarrassing. I have one non-Jewish great-great-grandmother who the story is she married in a civil ceremony to my great-great-grandfather, Theodor Hoffman. This is on my dad's mom's side. How did that happen? She was 15 and he was 25. She had 2 kids and then divorced when she turned 21 or 22 and abandoned the family and left the kids with the Jewish father, who remarried a Jewish stepmother. So I mean, my great-grandmother had a Jewish father and a Jewish stepmother, but a non-Jewish mother. And so how did that happen? The girl who was 15 who got married, her mother had remarried to a guy named Alfred Kronek. But Alfred Kronek was originally named Adolf Kohn, and he was the first cousin of Theodor Hoffman, my great-great-grandfather. So he must have married the mother and then wanted to get rid of the daughter and married her off to his cousin, and the marriage didn't work out. So anyway, that was a big mystery, and she has all sorts of not good non-Jewish relatives that I don't need to talk about. Okay, can you provide a web link for the indexed Matzevot in the Jewish cemetery of Eisenstadt? Wow. I'd have to look that up, which I can. I'm not sure if I can answer questions and do it at the same time, but there are some books that were done by Wachstein on Eisenstadt, and then Johannes Reiss, when he was at the Austrian Jewish Museum, redid that and now has lots of information. He left that museum, and so let me see if I can actually find him so you can do that. And he calls himself the transcriber now, der Transkribierer, which I have to spell right to get here. Let's see. And There he is. He's on Instagram, and let's see if I can get I will put that in an answer. Okay. Type answer. There we go. Okay. So that's how you can find him. Now where am I? Are you still keeping most of your public genealogy findings on Genie versus elsewhere? Yes, I put everything on Genie. It's easier to update there. And it updates for everybody on the Genie tree of 180 million people. Anyway, you can find that transcriber and the answered questions on the Q&A, whoever asked that. Halfan and Sarfati families are from Rhodes and Istanbul. Later, I think. That is true. So a lot of people say Halfan, it's a Sephardic name. It may not originally be Sephardic. Most of the Halfans, I think, that you find in the sort of non-Ashkenaz areas are around in the 1600s, and we're talking about Halfan in the 1500s. There's a Halfan family in Metz that goes back in France very early in the 1600s or 1500s. So it's possible that that's a family that's spread out from France and into the Sephardic areas. Sarfati is also means French, so it's clearly a French origin family. How many languages do I know? German, my German's pretty good. I studied there when I was a student in college for a semester, and heard a lot and learned a lot growing up. So German's pretty good. My French is not great, but okay. And that's about it. I've been, learning Hebrew. I did know it a little bit for my bar mitzvah, but that's been a long time. And now I can sort of read tombstones and some other things, but it gets a little difficult. Are there familial records for Moravia? That's a specific question. And the answer is not online for the most part. There may be some that are in archives that we haven't scanned yet, and we're working on that. These are records that track all of the families in Bohemia and Moravia. For Bohemia, we have them. In Moravia, we don't. How can I see a list of the people on the memorial? You have to go there, I guess, to see it, but it's a list of all the victims in Vienna. So you can find that on JewishGen. You can find it on Yad Vashem's website. Let's see. So S. Maria Joe says, wonder if Viennese families had similar journeys coming to Vienna from Poland, Ukraine, or Russia, but before that coming from Italy, Portugal, etc. I don't think that there's any proven Sephardic families in Eastern Europe. And that's a myth that developed in the late 1800s that, half of Litvaks think they're Sephardic, but aren't. So there hasn't been any confirmation of any of those family legends. And they do appear to just arise at the late 1800s and not exist earlier. So they're probably the fake news of the 1890s. So I would not be looking for antecedents in Italy or Portugal if I have family in Poland, Ukraine, and Russia. Let's see. Randy's contact info is already done. What else we have here? Ruth Ellen Mulberg. Let's see. Ruth Ellen Mulberg, and I also like Barbara Kintert, the Viennese woman who did the microhistory of her building and her street. She's just a wonderful lady, and a lot of people, when we go to distributors, they say, "Oh, it's 2 hours, and how can you cut it?" And in theory, we could cut something like that, but it's really almost the best part of the film to see her and these other sort of side stories. And so we decided not to cut the film down to a shorter time length because we're also in love with her story and how that fits into the broader narrative. So thank you for saying that. She's terrific. And Vivian says, I'm a 13th cousin through the Austerlitzes. Yes. The Austerlitz is not connected yet to Fioretta, that family. That's one of those sort of side shows, because how can you not see that amazing castle in the Borgenland, which I just love. but the Austerlitzes are on my father's mother's side. That Biedermann side sort of connects to them. There is an Austerlitz family in Prague, and so the question is, are they connected to that Prague family, or do they just come from the town of Austerlitz, which is in Moravia, where both families clearly originate somehow? And I've not yet been able to figure that out. But the most famous Austerlitz is, of course, Fred Astaire, whose family name was originally Austerlitz from Prague. Okay, Marie Schlaff says, do I do it full time? Was it a career? I've never professionally done any genealogy. It's always been a hobby or passion, but not as a professional. I've never done that. But there are good professionals, and you see them in the film. People like Wolf-Erich Eckstein and Julius Mueller, who do help people professionally, and I recommend them. Someone doesn't like chalk on the stone. That's fine. You cannot like it. I think it's fine. It's my ancestor stone, and who else is going to look at it or see it if we don't do it? So I think it'll be okay. According to Ancestry, 51% Eastern. Let's see, this is Katie Petrogallo. What good is DNA? I'm not an expert on the DNA and making connections that way. My understanding is sometimes there's terrific success with it, but it has to do with a lot of luck, and you have to have someone pretty close to you also testing. So, but you can ask questions on the Jewish Genealogy portal on Facebook. I recommend that to everybody, and you can also get DNA help there. Diane Case, is there health funds in Amsterdam? Yes, there are health funds everywhere. It means a money changer. Aline Franklin also thinks the Horowitzes came from Spain. You're wrong. They did not. It's, again, a recent legend that started in 1890. There's a whole article on Avotenu online that Rabbi Abraham Marmerstein and I put together, proving that that's a false story. So Horowitzes came from Horowitz, which is from Bohemia. Is Genie the same thing as Ancestry? Genie is a platform for building your tree. Ancestry has one too. Ancestry operates, as does MyHeritage, as a data aggregator where they collect data sets like the US Census and then sell you access to them. Genie does not have data, records to help you build your tree. It's just about the platform for building the tree. So it's just a program for building, and you can use the other ones to find census records and other things you attach to your tree. Okay, I've finished the Q&A. Rami, I have not looked at all the messages in the chat, but I can if you want.
Sure. We have about 5-6 minutes left.
Okay, so let's see. Someone has a Catan. Carrie has a Catan in Padua, which is near Venice. Yeah. That's the or Catan family, maybe or another Catan family. It's I think ripe for exploration. The Italian side, for some reason, there's not a lot of good online resources for Italian Jewish genealogy yet, but we need to work on that. And I wanted to also, before I go, give another plug for people to rate the film on IMDb or Rotten Tomatoes. Maybe Avrami, you can put those links in the chat somewhere. The way it works with online film distribution is a lot of people use these ratings. So if you go to Amazon, it'll use the IMDb rating for Fioretta, and for some reason, I think for like some competitors went in and gave a few really low rankings, like 0 rankings to our film, which there were very few rankings at all. And so we need some positive ones to balance those out and raise our ranking to what it should be, which is probably close to 9 out of 10, I would think, considering on the feedback that we get from people. So if people can go in and make an IMDb account and give it a rating, I would really appreciate it. It takes very little time to do that, and you can also try on Rotten Tomatoes, where we do have 100% rating. let's see if I can answer any other questions quickly. Most of these are in the Q&A. I think most of these have been asked already, unless you can point me to some. It's a little hard for me. Oh, that's the Q&A. Okay, sorry. I'm looking at the wrong thing. No wonder. I think I'm getting tired a little bit. So I'm gonna close it off now, I think. And hopefully everybody enjoyed the film. I'm sorry if there were technical difficulties, but the film can be rented in the US and Canada for, I think, like $5.99 or something on some of these platforms. And hopefully it'll be available worldwide very soon so more people can see it. And I just want to thank JewishGen and Avrami for allowing me to share this with all of you. If you're coming to the conference in Philadelphia in August, the film will be shown at the conference as well, and that might be nicer. It's always nice to see it on a big screen and not necessarily on a little TV or iPad or laptop. So anyway, thank you again for attending. You can all hopefully find me and reach me if you have any further questions or ask questions on the Jewish Genealogy portal on Facebook, which I also moderate. So thanks again, Avrami.
Thank you, Randy. And thank you to everyone who joined us today. We will be sending out a link to the recording to this session, hopefully tomorrow. And alongside will be a survey, which I hope everyone will fill out. It will help us plan future programs. We'll also include Randy's information and the link to IMDb and the Rotten Tomatoes, the links so that you can give it a great ranking and a great review. We have two upcoming webinars with Dr. Alexander Bader. Those will be on June 19th and June 26th. I hope you will join us. The registration link will be sent out. And to stay informed of all of our programs, please be sure you're registered for the Jewish Genealogy portal on Facebook, as Randy mentioned, and also our discussion group. You can access both of those through the JewishGen site. Finally, I'd also like to mention, as Randy has, that there is a major Jewish genealogy conference taking place this summer in Philadelphia. It is a wonderful opportunity to connect with other genealogists and to learn directly from experts and people who have deep experience researching many different facets of genealogy. It will take place August 18th through August 22nd, and JewishGen will have a very significant presence there. Many of our team members and volunteers from throughout the world will be there. Randy will be there, obviously, and I hope that you will all try to come. You can learn more at the iajgs.org website. And finally, thank you again for joining us today. Wish you a wonderful remainder of the day. And if you're celebrating Shavuot next week, wish you a Chag Sameach. Take care.